tonight! Oh wait, that's the wrong show, isn't it? Welcome everybody to Pressing Issues for Sunday, August 23rd. Welcome those of you who just finished watching Tom's live stream from the Grand Floridian. I wasn't watching it until the very end, but it sounded like there was a lot of something going on, so I don't know what happened, but it was pretty funny just hearing Tom at the end with his anxiety-ridden live stream. Anyway, welcome everybody to this week's episode of Pressing Issues. I've been out of here for 2 weeks now. Actually traveling last week and in Walt Disney World the week before. So things have been kind of busy for me, but that just gives me a lot of stuff to talk about this week. We got 3 weeks worth of things to catch up on. So I'd like to welcome my panelists tonight. We have Jill Diffendahl.
Hello.
And Jill's not Ashley, even though it says Ashley there. But we do have Ashley.
I should be so lucky.
Hi.
And Ashley's not Jill, but there's Ashley. Hi, Ashley.
Hi.
And then, and we have Axel.
I'm back.
There's Axel, and he's Axel with that fancy shirt on, a team member shirt, no less. I love that shirt.
I can never wear this in the park, so I mean, I'm wearing it now.
No, it's a good time to wear.
This is not biased whatsoever.
Axel 2020. Everybody in the chat is Axel 2020. Having Jill and Ashley mixed up reminds me of the stream on Thursday night with Scotty and Piano Rob getting mixed up. But we fixed that. Anybody who didn't watch that stream on Thursday night with Scotty Kilwine and Piano Rob Volpe from Jelly Rolls, you should go back and watch that. It was a pretty amazing live stream.
It was awesome.
We had the two of them in the WDWNT studio playing piano for 2 hours. We raised $13,000 almost. Did we hit the 13,000? Mm-hmm. We were like at 12,800. Okay.
Yeah.
So we had $13,000 raised for Give Kids the World, which was spectacular. And Scotty and Rob did a great job. It was pretty amazing. They had two big pianos that somehow they got into the studio. I think we had to bring them in by helicopter or something. But it was pretty amazing. And so if you didn't see it, you should at least go back and watch it. Anyways, let's get on to today's show. I only have a couple of topics, but both, I think, are going to result in several rants. Let's talk about Shop Disney first, because I know Ashley wants to rant about Shop Disney. So there's been some mini main attraction merchandise releases that have been a disaster. There have been, so the latest one, so the mini main attraction stuff has gone on sale, and then they started the merch pass thing, which means some people can get 1 or 2 items, but not all of them. Still doesn't stop the resellers, because the resellers just set up like 25 different email accounts so they can get all the merch. So it doesn't really serve its purpose. But then if people don't buy their item when they get selected, well, it doesn't sell. And so then what happens? Well, you would expect that Disney would email the people that are still waiting, that didn't get selected for anything, and give them the opportunity to buy it. Well, it seems like they did that once to some extent. But what happened earlier this week was they just threw all the leftover stuff on Shop Disney. So they had everything from the Small World to the Carousel, Peter Pan, they had some pirate stuff, all the backlog of mini main attraction that didn't get sold. They just threw on Shop Disney on a random like Wednesday afternoon, didn't give anybody a heads up, and there it went. First come, first serve to those in the know. So it was people were kind of annoyed with that, because those who couldn't get it the first time, or who got their orders canceled or whatnot, then really didn't know this was coming, didn't have a chance to get anything else. So it was kind of crazy. And then then this last weekend, for the Dumbo stuff, I don't even know, did they send a second round of emails to the people for Dumbo?
I don't believe so. Not a second round.
No, I think they sent a second round last month, but not this month for the Dumbo. So why they're doing things the way they're doing, I don't know. But Ashley, I'm going to turn it over to you because you have some other great stories. And I kind of stayed out of it this week, so I was kind of busy in the parks and didn't bother too much with the merch. So go ahead, Ashley.
So yeah, with Shop Disney, I mean, I don't know. Every time we say it can't get worse, it's like somebody at Shop Disney says, "Hold my Dole Whip, I'm gonna make it worse," because so we had the first string of problems, which in some cases was great. They released a whole bunch of, the backlog merch on a random, I think it was Wednesday, at sometime between noon and 1 o'clock. Just threw it up there. And my sister called me, and this is how I found out. My sister, God bless her, she called me. I don't know how she found out. Literally panting, out of breath, running up the stairs, screaming. They put it all up there because I was at work. They put it all up. What do you want? What do you need? And so I will say I was fortunate enough to get the Peter Pan lounge slide that I had missed out on. And but I was also pretty upset because I had just the week before paid over retail on eBay to get pins that I had missed. So I wound up paying double for pins that I could have scored on this random Wednesday potentially. And that was annoying. And it also gypped a lot of people. On top of that, the next morning, it started coming out that a lot of those orders that were placed the day before for that back stock that they found were being canceled. So they somehow oversold what they had found. Who I don't understand how you necessarily do that, but they did. So a lot of the poor people who were all excited because they were going to complete or get what they had missed were now getting gypped a second time. So that was the first bad. And then they did Merch Pass for Dumbo. And that seemed to go slightly okay. I didn't get anything, but oh well. Luckily, somebody in my family did and was able to get the pins for me. But the plush, they apparently keyed into some kind of deficiency or defectiveness in the plushes. So those are all gone. They're not selling them until early next year. So who knows how that's going to work. But it was really interesting because the UK Shop Disney, who they had, does anybody remember how much earlier they went up on Shop Disney UK versus when they came up for us in the US? Was it about a week? I forget. It was like 5 days to a week, I think. Yeah. Well, they got theirs, and it was like the same day that we were able to order here in the US, they got emails saying, "Hey, your plush order's canceled. Really, really sorry." And it says they were going to be able to reorder in 72 hours or something like that, which is weird because the US email said, "Hey, you got selected for Merch Pass for the plush. JK, you can't buy it, and you can't buy it until early next year," which makes no sense because you would think if they ordered it all as one stock, if it's being replenished, why is UK going to be able to reorder theirs in 72 hours and we have to wait almost 6 months? Maybe. Who knows? So that was weird. And then the third issue they've had this week is apparently a lot of people, they're getting their packages. So it originally ships through UPS, and then at some point in transit will get turned over to the Postal Service. And when that happens, they're getting shipped back to sender because the addresses are incomplete. So I did hear one actual example that a woman, I guess she had called Shop Disney and figured it out. They didn't put her apartment number on the address label. So it's like it missed that second line of addresses. So, I mean, that's just, so now on top of all of this, even people who did Dumbo merch or other MMA merch or just other random things that people have ordered this week, because they did have a couple of promos this week, some of them are still missing out and having to wait an hour and a half to prayerfully, hopefully get somebody on the phone who can fix it and send them back to them. I mean, it's just a mess. I don't understand how, well, I mean, again, every time, I don't know how it could be worse, and it gets worse. Like, it's like they're genuinely not even trying, and they could be getting so much revenue right now from people who can't get to the parks for this reason or that reason, but they can't seem to figure this out. And it's getting to the point where a lot of the people that I've talked to and seen on Facebook and things, they're like, I'm not ordering anything else. I'm done. I'm out. I'm over it. It's just a mess every time. And they're finished. And I can't understand why they can't figure any of this out.
The other thing that's really interesting in this case is that Disney had announced that they were suspending all limited edition merch releases in the park, and they're going to go on Shop Disney, and that's kind of the genesis of this whole problem. But then this past week, they come out with a pass holder only early purchase opportunity for a Haunted Mansion Funko Pop that they did at World of Disney and Frontierland Trading Post in the Magic Kingdom. They also released the Black Cauldron limited edition of only 500 Magic Bands for the anniversary of that movie. And then they released limited edition Epcot Forever Magic Bands. Not that that show's any good, but I still bought the Magic Band. So
or may ever be
they are... They are, yeah, well, hopefully not. But they are doing limited edition merchandise releases, and people from WW&T were there for the Funko Pops, and everything went spectacularly well. Whether you were at World of Disney or at Frontierland Trading Post, we had people in both places. There were lines, there were social distancing markers, things went really smoothly. They had tons of stock. They had a separate register just for that, and they had tons of stock right behind the register. And you went up and you could buy up to 3, I believe, of the Funkos. You know, you bought your 3, you left, and it was super efficient, and it was fine. There was no issues at all. So to be honest, the issues with these merchandise releases are worse when they sell them on Shop Disney than when they do them in the parks. That's what's absurd, is that the whole thing was, we're not going to do it in the stores because there's too much coronavirus. Well, the stores handle it fine now, and Shop Disney still can't handle it. So it's a mess one way or the other. But on the other hand, on the bright side, there's still more Splash Mountain merchandise that keeps coming into the store every couple of days. So those tumblers that came out weeks and weeks and weeks ago are back. And so all of you who are holding out and refusing to pay super inflated eBay prices for these things, you know, you're holding out. The good move, because the stuff's still coming. So prices should start to, I think, settle down on a lot of that stuff.
Yeah,
if the only way you can get it is through eBay.
In one way, it's almost good that some of this is happening, because it's potentially making people realize, oh, if I just wait a little while, it'll show back up on Shop Disney, or it'll show up in the parks. I mean, we've seen that happen with like this latest random dump of Minnie Maid attraction stuff. We've seen it happen with merchandise in the parks. I know for a while that Kevin Loungefly backpack was nowhere to be found, and now it's everywhere. The Country Bear wishables sold out like immediately on Shop Disney, and now they seem like they're never going to go away. They're just sitting there. So it's almost kind of like, why bother paying twice as much from a reseller? Just wait it out, and you can potentially get it again at least retail price, either in the parks or online. The other thing I want to say from my personal experience dealing with Shop Disney is I recently had some of the Disneyland 65th merchandise. I accidentally sent it to my old address instead of my new address, because both were still in the system. And when I called them up, they could not redirect it. So all of you people who have had Minnie Maid attraction stuff where the address was wrong and it's getting returned to sender, I wouldn't hold out a whole lot of hope that Disney is going to be able to redirect the package to you, because I think that is basically an upgraded service to pay UPS for, and most retailers don't pay UPS extra for that service. So it's just going to get returned to Disney and probably get put back into stock. So don't be too hopeful that you're going to get your stuff. But yeah, as most people in the chat are saying, and then there was silence because everybody's just. Yeah, they will return honestly, you. They will refund you.
So we were at the Magic Kingdom yesterday. Days are a bit like all over the place since March 15th, so I'm still trying to find out. I'm happy that somebody texted me and saying Sunday it's pressing issues. But we were at the Magic Kingdom yesterday, and you start, like, even for me, that just like I'm a local, but very recent local, I can now pick the YouTube, geez, it's too late of an evening. It was
Axel's
too big
drinking.
Of a day. I can now spot the eBay resellers like from miles away. It's always the same people. They always like go packed. If people wouldn't buy on eBay, they wouldn't have a job, and they still have a job. They still sell.
It's Ashley's fault. I blame Ashley.
I was going to say, but it's that catch-22 when you're trying to complete a set of something and nothing else has come back up. It's like, what do? Do I wait and hold out hope, or do I pay an extra $20 and make sure that I have it to complete the set?
I mean, and to be honest though, here's the thing. I think is that if you're paying like $20 over retail, you got to realize the resellers have to take out eBay fees, PayPal fees, sales taxes, and plus their time and
but they're
gas
still
to get
making
to the
money.
parks. They're making money.
They're still making money. Like,
but you don't have to feel. Oh, they're still making money, right? And they do it in bulk, which is why they're making the money. Like, you can't make money by reselling just one thing. But you know, out of the $20 over retail that Ashley is spending for the pins, probably only like $3 or $4 is going to the reseller, because everything else is getting eaten up by fees and whatnot. And so you got to factor in shipping and everything else. So, you know, I think there's a limit. I think people that are selling things for like triple retail are you know, out of line. But if you need to buy something to complete your collection and you're paying $20 over retail when most of that $20 is going to get eaten up by eBay and PayPal fees and shipping, then the reseller's not making enough money. They're doing it over and over and over again, so they make their money in volume. But for your individual single little item, they're not making a whole lot of money.
Well, they're making enough money and they're causing enough frustration that.
Oh yeah.
And that's something like, now for us it's easy. Like, I can go, like, whenever I have a park pass, I would say every day, but whenever I have a park pass, before, or anybody who comes here on vacation, like, for instance, you come on vacation, you stay here a week. With park passes, you're lucky to go to Epcot once, because, like, why would you go more than once to Epcot right now? And you want those freaking macaron ears. So you go to France, you want those ears, and just in front of you, you have a reseller just taking them all out of the rack, put them in a bag, walking away, and that's it. And then
I'd advocate hitting the guy and taking one.
Well, but it's
really.
Not everybody would do that. Not everybody has, like,
no, I know,
the guts to walk up and say, like, hey. But I mean, it happens, and then you have to imagine the people standing there, and I would be furious if I want those ears, and just somebody in front of me bought 30 pairs. I'm not going to buy them on eBay from them if I could have bought them right there. And then you go to an employee, and these guys say, well, we just restocked. Everything is there. Come back next Thursday. Like, yeah, but this is my vacation. There's no next Thursday. So right. Although they might not make tons of money, they cause a lot of frustration. Definitely.
Oh, they do. Absolutely, they do.
They really need to do something about limits. Like the item limits are a serious problem. And they have been on so many pieces of merchandise for years now. Like, it's not like this is a new thing. They need to change the merchandise limits.
It's not, because I always thought that the rule was anything that wasn't limited edition was supposed to be a limit of 10. But
Yeah,
clearly they're not enforcing it, because to your point, you see them all the time.
People bring their kids and their wives and everything else, so they buy 40 or 50.
You shouldn't be allowed to do that. It should be like 10 per party or something like that. And even 10 is kind of because if you're buying for your family and a handful to have gifts, 10 is enough. Even because you and your partner, whomever, are clearly probably going to take one home. And then you have 9 more for gifts. Why do you need more than 10 of anything? Like, I'm almost to the point, I would be willing to pay like $5 more for all Disney, like a surcharge of $5 on all Disney merchandise, if that went towards enforcing limits, fixing the things on Shop Disney so I don't have to do this stupid merch passing.
Don't give them any ideas. You're giving Bob Chapek ideas. He sees that $5.
If it worked, that would be my caveat. It has to work. You have to actually use that surcharge to fix these problems.
Here's the other thing.
They're not going to.
It's not like Disney hasn't fixed this problem before. They cracked down on resellers in Disneyland last year. They trespassed a bunch of people and revoked their APs because they were
their
resellers.
Annual passes.
So why are they not doing that? There's so much outcry about this all over the internet. Disney has to be seeing it. They already are trying to do what they can to kick annual pass holders out of the park as much as possible. Why don't they crack down on this? They've already done it once. There's no reason they can't do it in Walt Disney World.
It's very true.
You know, they've been selling pins since 1999 that are limited edition, and they were limit 2 per person. They've been doing it for 20 years. Limit 2 per person. No one complained about the limit of 2 per person because how many pins do you need? 1 for you and 1 to trade. That's pretty good reasoning right there. And so people have been happy with that. The pins have been 2 per person for 21 years now, and it's worked out great. Why they can't do it with all this other merchandise, I don't know.
Because money. Somebody
in the chat said perhaps a Tom Coyless expose can put the resellers out of business.
It's not like it hasn't crossed his mind.
I'm sure, right? No, his next expose is how all these bloggers get into the parks every day without staying in hotels. That's coming up soon, I think. But anyway, so yeah, I mean, again, there's all these problems with merchandise in the parks. There's problems with merchandise on Shop Disney. They could just make more. I mean, that seems to be the solution. Like these lounge flies and stuff, they're not limited. I mean, the mini main attraction stuff is like limited release. That just means that they don't tell you what the number is that they make. They could make more. There's no reason they can't make more. So
I thought limited release meant that it was only available for like a set amount of time, not necessarily that the quantity was necessarily reduced.
Well, limited release means they made a certain amount, and they're not going to tell you how many it is because it's a lot, but they're not going to make any more after that shipment. So it's like they, limited edition pins are like 1,000 or 1,500. The magic bands are like 1,500. The limited release mini stuff is probably like 50,000. They just don't tell you, because then it sounds
somewhat high.
It sounds, yeah, it is very high, and they don't tell you because then you'd think, well, there's so many of these out there, I'm not paying this price. So that's all limited release means. It doesn't really mean anything. And if they wanted to make more, they certainly could. They should just make, I mean, limited. They could order 100,000 instead of 50,000 and still call it limited release because they've only got one shipment. It just has twice as many in it. That's all.
Limited release just means wait it out, buy it at the outlet after the festival.
There you go.
That's the limited release thing. Oh, and by the way, now that I'm on camera, somebody asked about those little magic band slap bands, like these things. They are super small. but you get a cool Mickey hat you can put on your watch. So I only need to wear one band. Sorry, this was a commercial. We can now go back to arguing about what we were arguing.
Well, I think we're gonna switch topics because I think we've gone through all of our Shop Disney rants, and as you can tell by the silence, I think a lot of us are just exasperated by the whole thing. So, although I placed 3 orders for some of the mini stuff earlier this week, I haven't gotten any cancellations yet. I don't collect any of that stuff. I bought it all, and I'm going to put it all in the charity auction in November. So, anybody who's looking for that stuff, you know, stay tuned for our charity auction in November because I think we're going to have a ton of cool stuff there. But anyway, let's talk about Universal and Disney and different approaches to coronavirus. And the reason I mentioned this was because, so in the past 2 months, I spent a considerable amount of time at both Universal Studios and Walt Disney World. And their approaches to things are very different, and I thought this would be a great discussion in order to, you know, take a look at how things are happening. Now that we're, let's see, we're 3 months, almost 3 months into Universal opening, and we're a month and a half into Disney reopening. You know, things have sort of settled down to some sort of, you know, they should know what's happening. The parks kind of should know what to expect. People should know what to expect. I think everybody's had kind of a chance to see how things are going, and so I want to talk about the different approaches to things between the parks. And the first thing that came up, I kind of made a bit of a list here. But one of the first things that came up, obviously both resorts have social distancing markers in their queues and everything like that. But a lot of times what I've noticed with attractions at Disney, and this happened today, and we tweeted about it. So, for example, the line for Space Mountain was all the way back almost to the other side of the Tomorrowland stage where the Stitch thing happens. And I looked at that and I'm like, this happens all the time. Like, Space Mountain has a queue that stretches out all the way across the walkway all the time, and it's a kind of a hassle. And it happens when Fast Pass is in use because there's a backup at the Fast Pass points. But even now that Fast Pass is not in use, it still backs up out into the walkways, and that creates a traffic jam in the land. It makes it difficult for people walking around to social distance because, do you cut right in between 2 different groups that are 6 feet apart? Then you're obviously less than 6 feet away from somebody, or do you go all the way around, but then you got a long way to go out of your way to get around the line? So that's a problem. It's a problem. It's definitely a problem in Space Mountain. I've seen it as a problem in Space Mountain a lot. It's definitely a problem at Frozen Ever After in Norway, where the line can get out into the World Showcase Promenade even. It's definitely a problem at Slinky Dog, where the line stretches out of the land to some extent. There's a big photo op right as you enter Toy Story Land from the park, and like the line will usually eclipse that photo op, and people want to take pictures here, but they can't because the line for Slinky Dog is in the way. You go to Universal, and the only time in my experience over the past couple of months that a line was very problematic and blocked a considerable amount of the walkway was the line for Hagrid's Magical Creatures Motorbike Adventure. Hereafter, it will be known as Hagrid's, because I don't like to say all those words. So when they were doing Virtual Queue, the Virtual Queue had a entrance that was sort of at the beginning of the land, and then the line to get in, to check in for the Virtual Queue, usually ran all the way down past Poseidon's Fury at some times. And they had social distancing markers on the ground all the way down there. But that means if you're trying to walk from, Lost Continent around to Jurassic Park, and you got to go through, the whatever Hogsmeade. Is that That's Hogsmeade, right?
Yes.
That's Hogsmeade.
It's you have to go through, and there's all these people in line clogging up the walkways, and so that happened at Hagrid's. It really didn't happen anywhere else at Universal. It didn't happen for things like Rip Ride Rocket. It didn't happen for things like Mummy. It didn't happen for Men in Black. It didn't happen. It happened a little bit for Bourne Stuntacular because they didn't let people into the inner queue until the previous show had let out. But at Bourne, that's a pretty wide walk. I can't even talk tonight. A pretty wide walkway, and people were on the sidewalk against the facade. So at Bourne, it didn't make a big difference. I can't think of anywhere else at Universal that the line would spill out into the land and like crisscross half of the land, like Space Mountain line went all the way back to anti-gravities. That was kind of ridiculous. And so here's an instance, and this isn't honestly doesn't have really anything to do with coronavirus, but it just has to do with the way that these rides are designed with queues that can't hold the number of people that are supposed to be in the queue. And you might say, well, Space Mountain is 45 years old at this point. Well, Slinky Dog Dash is 2 years old at this point, and it has the same problem. So there's not really any difference. It happens to new rides as well as old. Hagrid's is new, but actually the Hagrid's problem was the virtual queue more than anything else, because once they got rid of the virtual queue and let people just stand in line, the line usually didn't spill out into Lost Continent. It was pretty well contained within Hogsmeade. But you've got these issues. Seven Dwarfs Mine Train is another, where you have people that are, when FastPass was in operation, you had people at the FastPass touch points, and there would be a mob of people, and we saw it at the cast preview day for Magic Kingdom, where there were like 30 people all crowded around. When the ride reopened, they're all crowded around the entrance to go in. At those FastPass touch points. It seems to happen a lot at Disney, and it doesn't happen at Universal hardly ever. And so, and like I said, some of the Disney rides are older, but some of them are definitely newer and still have the same problem. And it seems to me that Disney has the blessing of size. They built their parks with an essentially unlimited amount of land. Notice that Epcot doesn't really have a big problem other than Frozen for the most part, because
there's no rides.
Pretty popular.
There's nothing to do in that
there's
park.
No run. No, but even when there were rides, like the Soaring Queue, for example, nowadays, the Soaring Queue doesn't get backed up out into sunshine seasons because the queue's long enough. It was well designed. But, for example, the Grand Fiesta Tour queue can back up so far that it goes outside the pavilion. And that means the people that are in there that are trying to shop or eat have to be, zigzag around this queue line for the ride. And it's just, I think, poorly designed. I'm trying to think of other examples. Anybody? Is any?
I
just
think
looking at the chat to see. Go ahead.
I think the main issue with Disney is that they don't have a cleaning procedure that is well balanced. So what happens when they do a cleaning procedure, it backs up all the way because they empty the complete
because the ride basically stops.
They spray everything down and then they let it like turn once with nobody in. Whereas you could easily, and then let's take Rock and Roller Coaster. You could easily like get a train in, clean it, get it through, and then the next one would have people. So not that you're losing the whole track, but that you're doing every other train. Same thing for Mine Train, same thing for every boat ride in the park. That would like help with a lot of problems because the queue wouldn't be as backed up if you would have a better balanced cleaning procedure. But they don't. And the problem is, and we talked about that yesterday, the park opens at 9. They do a cleaning procedure every 2 hours. So you walk into the park between 9 and 10:45. It's a dream. You walk everywhere, it's cool, it's relaxed. Then come that 10:45, they start with their procedures. And it's a mess, but it's a giant mess. Coming from Haunted Mansion, going through this point at Peter Pan that is already a giant bottleneck, and now they've put a cord there, so there's a rope that you cannot even like have the full walkway. It's maybe what, 10 feet of place where you still have a stroller on the other side, because they need to get that queue line already in that area. So it's an immense bottleneck, and it's just because there's a cleaning procedure, and they do it like stubbornly, like every 2 hours. Every 2 hours, everything blocks, and it's like the world comes to an end. Everything stops. There's like a pause button, and then everybody's out in the street. On the other hand, I'm not saying that Universal is that much better. When we were there last Saturday, you have a few rides that break down, and everybody's in the street. So it gives you really like crowded feeling, although there's not so many people there. But just because some of the major rides are down, everybody's in the street. And then I felt better because last week, and then Jill was there, we went from Universal to Magic Kingdom, and Magic Kingdom didn't have that feeling. Magic Kingdom was open. It was like, oh, there's air again. There's less people here. There's definitely not less people, but just the rides are closed and everybody's in that street. And that's what's happening at Disney every 2 hours. So there's still work to do in those procedures, because I don't think they're doing it the right way with getting everybody off and cleaning it with nobody on it. They should do every other ride, because now there's so much loss in time, and you're just building up lines.
It was crazy.
Yeah,
I was just going to say, I was at Studios and we were in line for Slinky Dog. They did exactly that. They stopped the queue and did their cleaning procedures. They were running those trains through. Like, I can understand you spray down the train and then you run it through once to kind of dry it and let all the sanitizer work and dry. They ran those trains through like 4 times. Why do you need to run a train through 4 times after you spray it down? Like, that just didn't make sense to me. And I remember when we were there the week it opened, Jason, when we were in line with Tom, he was live streaming from the Jungle Cruise queue, and they ran every single boat through, which takes like 15 minutes at least for one boat. Like, it took forever for them to spray down and run every single boat through empty. And I mean, we
were at a standstill for like half an hour.
Yeah. The flip side is Universal does none of that. Universal does very little in terms of cleaning the attractions. What Disney does and what Universal does are night and day. But it's funny because you're absolutely right, Jason, that Universal doesn't have queues spilling out everywhere, and yet the waits at Universal are far worse. And there are so many more people in Universal than there are in Disney. So, but on the flip side too, like, you can look at the wait times at any attraction in Disney World. The thing is, those queues spilling out are incredibly deceptive. Like, they can say there's a 40-minute wait on Mine Train, and the queue can be spilling out of the standby entrance and down around the side of the attraction, but it will still take you maybe 25 minutes to get through that queue. So it's very deceptive. And part of it is, and I don't know if we've talked about this in the past, but pre-COVID, Disney used to hand these plastic red cards to guests as they entered the standby queue. And then the cast member at the ride load would take that card from them and report back the time. So they had a standardized measure of what the wait time was based on how long it was taking an actual guest to get through the queue. And they don't do that anymore because obviously you're not going to want to handle plastic cards between multiple guests and cast members, but there's no legitimate judge. So wait times at Disney, factoring in, they move much faster than the wait time usually says, unless you hit that point where they've shut something down, and then it's a total gamble how long you could be waiting until they go through that cleaning procedure. Because like Axel said, they're very stubborn about it, and they will spray everything down and run that ride through at least once, and you just kind of got to stand there and wait, and you have no idea when they're going to start loading guests again. No idea.
Well, and that's one of the things that I've, like, over the weekend, we've been like discussing and say, like, before COVID, you never realized, but people were like packed on each other in those lines, because you would go to Mine Train and Mine Train would have like a 90-minute wait, and you wouldn't even see anything because everything was inside once you enter, and people are just so packed on each other. And it's something that we need to realize, and Disney and even Universal has to realize that at some point it will never get like the same again. So they'll need to adapt to make sure that they can continue working with a space in between and not blocking up everything. And if you see what Universal did this weekend for I don't like the ride, the Rip It, Ride It, Rockets.
Rip Ride Rocket.
Rocket.
Close enough.
Yay, that one. They just like made an extended queue in front of that stage, which is like, okay, it doesn't bother anybody because like it's an open space anyway.
Right.
Same
it's an
for
open
the mummy
space and it
in
keeps
front of the
people out of the
building.
way.
There's an extra space to queue, and they try to do something alike for Small World, like just next to the Punzel Poopers. They just like made like a little waiting area with the lines going there, but there's nothing happening at Peter Pan. So Peter Pan is in the middle of already a terrible bottleneck. For Haunted Mansion, you go down to the water side and then go back up. So they do try, but it's definitely not easy. And it's the same for Splash Mountain, where from time to time they need to make way for a cavalcade, and there's just people lined up all along the streets, and they need to get those people out of the way to get the cavalcade through.
So, as somebody who hasn't been, the other thought that I had, because I mean, I went that first week, Universal was not that bad, and they were actually, it's kind of disappointing to hear because they were much better about cleaning and enforcing masks, and it's kind of disappointing to hear they just have kind of, they're letting it slide and saying forget it already.
Well, so we talked about this. I just want to clear this up because I mentioned this several weeks ago, that I think Universal and Disney took different tactics towards their cleaning. So Disney cleans the ride vehicles every 2 hours. What Universal has decided to do was make everybody use hand sanitizer immediately before they get on the ride vehicle. Now, obviously, if someone has COVID, it's not going to stop them from, like, coughing, but then you've got a mask on, too. So I think, the question is, if you're at Disney and you get on a ride vehicle that hasn't been cleaned in an hour and 58 minutes, are you better off or worse off than if the ride vehicle you got on wasn't cleaned for, 6 hours, but everyone that's been on that ride vehicle all day has used hand sanitizer? To me, it's kind of a,
when you present it like that,
6
like,
to 1,
I would
half dozen the other.
Yeah, I would almost argue, quite honestly, that you're better off with hand sanitizer. But my
I think
point
so
is,
too.
If it's becoming such an issue that it's now a logistical problem in the park, why aren't they just cutting the line? Like, have an actual cutoff point where, like, okay, because of social distancing, we can't let the line get any further than this point, and have a cast member there at the end of the line saying, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Please choose another attraction or
Because
something."
people will just stand around. I think people are just they'll just crowd around.
Let them. Tell them they have to go. I don't understand. And I do understand because people don't listen. But then enforce it. I mean, again, if we're all going to do what we need to do to be able to enjoy the parks in the era of COVID, you should be able to accept the fact that you can't just stand there and wait for the line to move, that you need to move on, go to a shop, go get a snack, go pick something else to ride, and come back. And it would help everybody, though, because then the line would keep moving and it wouldn't create these bottlenecks that tick everybody off.
So I think part of the
that would
issue...
be a perfectly acceptable answer to have somebody, telling people to move along, and you can't let the line get past this point.
So I think there's different issues that Disney has in different parks, and Epcot is a good example, and we saw some pictures that we tweeted today from Epcot, where things were pretty crowded, and as Axel mentioned, it's because there aren't hardly any attractions. So at Epcot, especially in World Showcase, everyone that's there is out on the promenade. Unless you're in line for Frozen or Grand Fiesta Tour or for whatever reason that dumb Canada movie, unless you're in line for one of those things, you're on the promenade. And the problem with Epcot is that they can let in X number of people based on capacity, but they can't control whether those people all go to Future World or they all go to World Showcase. And clearly, if they all go to World Showcase, like is normal to happen in the afternoons of most days, there's way too many people in World Showcase to be able to properly socially distance. So the Epcot capacity is based on, for example, Test Track having the queue full of people and Soaring having the queue full of people. And when those queues aren't full and all those people are in World Showcase, it makes, it effectively makes World Showcase capacity, it makes World Showcase have twice as many people as what the designed capacity is. Or the allowed capacity based on whatever formula they use. So I think Epcot is a big problem and much bigger than other parks because of that factor. But the other thing, and the Peter Pan Small World walkway has been a traffic jam for years. It's been a traffic jam for years and years and years, and they made stroller parking out of the way, and they made the Peter Pan queue longer and go way back into some interior rooms with a pretty spectacular queue, which helps a bit. But that walkway is still pretty jammed up, and the queue that Axel mentioned for Small World, the sort of extra queue that goes down by the bathrooms. I've been there. I've seen instances where people are just sort of blocking the walkway and they don't send them down that queue. I don't think there's enough staff to manage the things that need managing. So those are problems. I think at Universal, it seemed to me that there were always enough staff to manage queues when there would be issues, especially at Hagrid's. There were always like 3 or 4 team members around directing people and letting people know, because you'd walk towards Hogsmeade from Lost Continent, and you wouldn't know if there's just a line to get into the land. Is the line for the train? Is the line for Hagrid's? It's just kind of like a jumble. So there were always team members there helping you and telling you this is the line for the virtual queue. If you don't have a virtual queue return time, and you want to just go to Hogsmeade, go that way. There were always plenty of people doing it, but at Disney, it seems they're really, they have one cast member with that big sign that says end of line for Mine Train, but other than that, there's no, like the Space Mountain queue. The Space Mountain queue could certainly wrap down and around the side of the building and out of the way, but people just naturally line up in a straight line out from the entrance all the way across Tomorrowland, and there could be certainly a much more efficient way to route that line than to have it cross the entirety of Tomorrowland.
But that's the whole point why they both have different strategies for their guests as well. I mean, Universal has a limit capacity, So as long as they don't reach your capacity, you're still welcome to come in. Disney works with park passes. Disney works with park passes because still a lot of people are furloughed and did not come back, or they didn't need them to come back. And they know they still have a very low capacity on food. And that's different with Universal. Universal, and I mean, it didn't pay off at the end, and we see that right now, but Universal opened all the hotels. There you go. We have all our hotels, please pick whatever you want. They need to come back on that, but at least they tried, and they gave a lot of people, again, the opportunity to work. It's the same thing with Volcano Bay. Yes, we're stepping back 2 days from Volcano Bay, which I'm really sad about, but at least they tried. They opened their water park. Disney never even took a chance on it. They left everybody who's working at those parks at home, and they didn't even try it. Although there's many other water parks that are open and that are functioning, and to my knowledge, we're now, I think, a bit more than 2 months in. Nobody has come back and said, like, hey, I got COVID at Volcano Bay. And I'm not saying like, oh, it's the safest place, because yes, if you go on the rides, you don't wear a mask, and we still have to be very careful, but at least they tried. Disney never tried. And that's why Disney wants like to push people out of the park. Because I, as a pass holder, it hurts me to see that all of a sudden Disney says like, oh, we're not going to see that many people in the park. Please open the gates to the peasants. Let the annual pass holders walk in. Because hotel guests and regular paying guests, they can go to every park they want.
Wherever
and
they
then
want.
All of a sudden they don't see anybody. And then it's like, oh, well, now the pass holders, okay, it's their time. They can come. They might spend some money, but our other guests spend more, so we prefer to have them. But if we have no other choice, come on, let the hillbillies come in. And that's the way how I feel treated at Disney.
Yep.
And being a pass holder at Universal, that's a different thing. At least you feel appreciated. They did a lot of extra work, so I mean,
this was going to be actually a big part of
Universal and Disney.
Yeah, this was going to be a big part of my second hour discussion, is how Universal has all these pass holder perks. They have pass holder days and all that, and Disney has pretty much the reverse, where they treat their pass holders like scum. So let's come back to that in the second hour, because there's a lot to talk about there. What I want to do is we're getting close to the end of the first hour. I don't know how the chat is doing. Sometimes they get anxious for a rant. And
the chat is doing awesome, because Marklin just gave us a $5 super chat. Thank you, Marklin.
Woohoo! Thanks, Marklin. What I want to do is go on a little bit of a rant, because last week, Sunday night, I was flying home from the trip. I took my family to Florida for a week. We spent 4 days at Universal, where we pretty much did Volcano Bay every day. And then we did one of the usually Islands of Adventure for an hour or two in the afternoon. We went to Vero Beach for 2.5 days, and those of you who are longtime listeners will know that that was my first trip to Vero Beach, and it was very nice. We had a great time. And then we came back to Orlando and did Universal for another day. This time going to Universal Studios, because we hadn't done that earlier in the week. We didn't go to Disney. I didn't go to Disney at all. I know my wife and daughter went shopping at Downtown Disney, but we didn't go to Disney at all for mostly anything.
Disney Springs.
Yeah?
Yeah, not Downtown Disney, Disney Springs.
Did I call it Downtown Disney? Oh,
you
boy.
did.
All right.
Don't let Tom
I
hear.
didn't go. I didn't even know what it was called, because
No.
I didn't go. I don't like going there. But
We dragged you
went,
the one
we
night
didn't
to go
see
to
you.
dinner.
We were waiting to have
Yes,
drinks with you. You didn't come.
Yep. You did
I had
drag
to
me
drink
today,
with Axel
but then
alone.
yes, you did. Yes, you did. I did go the one night to have dinner at House of Blues, but the good thing about that was I could park all the way at the end of the orange garage and go down the steps, and House of Blues was right there, and that was it. I didn't have to go to any of the rest of Disney Springs, so that was good. And I was at the Poly. We did the last day. We did spend a bit of time because the kids really wanted to ride the monorail. So we went to the Poly and the Contemporary and the Grand Floridian and just did a bit of shopping and rode the monorails around. But we didn't go to any parks. And so part of the reason that we didn't go to any parks was because Disney's still not selling annual passes. And so I have an annual pass, but I could not buy an annual pass for my wife or kids to go to the parks. And I'm not going to pay for a 5 or 6 day ticket when I could get an annual pass for another $100 basically. It's just absurd. And so I refused to go. I said, we're not going to Disney parks because I can't buy an annual pass, and that's that. And so we spent time at Universal, and the kids loved Volcano Bay. We went to Volcano Bay three different days. We rope dropped all 3 days, the first 3 days of our trip. We rode the Krakatoa water coaster. The kids did almost all the other slides. We spent a day with Axel and his wife there. That was great fun. We went in the wave pool. We had it was hot, but that was the best place to be in the heat, and the kids loved it, and it was great fun. And we stayed at Cabana Bay, which is a really nice hotel. We spent some time in the pool at Cabana Bay. So it turned out really like a nice trip, even though we didn't go to any Disney parks. And so here's my problem, and here's where I'm getting a rant, is that the kids now want to go to Disney. I mean, they haven't been to Galaxy's Edge since it opened, so I kind of want to take them to Galaxy's Edge. But they haven't been to Disney in a long time. Long time. Long for us is I don't know. Caitlin was there last October. Lindsay was there. It was longer than that. But anyway, they haven't been there in a while. They want to go. Angel wants to go. But I don't want to take them without annual passes because we go so often that it's a waste of money to buy a 5-day park ticket for our travel situation. So I just want to buy an annual pass. We booked the Pop Century for 5 nights at the end of November around Thanksgiving so that I could come down to the studio for the Toys for Tots Marathon show for that weekend, and the kids could go to the Disney parks. So the problem is that we still don't have annual passes. And if it rolls around to November and we still can't buy annual passes, I'm going to be fairly annoyed that we booked this trip and I have to buy them 5-day park passes. At least I don't have to add the park hopper option on, so that's a bit of savings. But I'm going to be pretty annoyed that I can't buy them an annual pass. And so Universal says annual passes. Disney still doesn't sell annual passes. And I think that's absurd. For the way that they're treating annual pass holders, no one in their right mind should want to buy an annual pass. But see, the thing is, I know we're going to come back in the future within a year, so it makes sense. So even though Disney's treating their annual pass holders like crap, I still want to buy an annual pass for my wife and kids, and they won't sell one to me. That, to me, is absurd. But anyway, that's my rant. Sorry it wasn't as heated as it has been in the past, but that was a short one. I think there'll be a bigger one in the next hour. But the other thing I wanted to quick say before we take a break for commercial here is that Axel mentioned about Universal opening their water parks and all their hotels and this and that. I think when they first opened in June, their hotels had fairly good rates of people. I think most of the hotels were fairly full. I think now that it's getting to the end of August, and schools are back in session. Well, yeah, Tom lived there. But so, and you mentioned about the water parks. And how, they opened Volcano Bay and Disney still hasn't opened Typhoon Lagoon in the middle of summer, which is absurd. Now that it's the, almost September, they're going to close Volcano Bay on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I think, there's going to be a natural decline of attendance at water parks, especially after September 1st. even though it's still pretty hot in Florida. But kids are going back to school, right? So even locals are going back to kids are going back to school. They're not coming to Volcano Bay. So I don't think that I mean, and maybe I read this wrong, Axel, but you sort of made it sound like Universal opened Volcano Bay along with the other two parks, and now they're having to backtrack because that was a bad decision. I don't think it was a bad decision. I think it was a great decision, and I think the only reason they're closing Volcano Bay 2 days a week now is because attendance is going to be lower because school has started. That's all. I don't think they're. I don't think they're closing Volcano Bay because they made a bad decision to open it.
Oh no, I'm not saying a bad decision. It's something that at least they tried. They could have opened like day one and say like Volcano Bay is a Friday to Monday park, and that's it. At least they tried, and by being open for the last 2.5 months, they've seen like where do we have the people, and what days can we afford to close, and that's the same with the hotels. Unfortunately, it's Sapphire Falls, and I had a stay booked at Sapphire Falls, mainly for Horror Nights, which was also canceled, so I canceled. But I wanted to stay there, definitely. But yeah, it's at least, and that's the whole thing with Universal. I have this thing with Universal with at least they tried. It's like me in school. When I came home, and that was the thing I said to my parents, at least I tried. And that's the thing with Universal as well. Like, I appreciate that they tried. I appreciate that they got people back to work. Because in Disney's case, there's still a lot of people being furloughed and being home. And the hotels are being pushed back. And it's a lot of hotels that don't even have an opening date. Yes, like Universal had to backtrack on the hotels, but at least there was an effort to try, and they made it available for everyone. But just like the international tourism isn't here, and that's a big part.
Yeah. Yeah. And so Universal tried and helped out the guests. But also, as you mentioned, Axel. Go ahead, Jill.
You just need to take into consideration that Universal doesn't own those hotels. So how much of that was really Universal's decision, and how much of it was actually Lowe's decision, and how much of it now to close them again is Lowe's decision. So you can't credit Universal that much with the hotels opening or not opening, because it wasn't really their call.
I kind of figure they make those decisions sort of in consultation with each other.
Sure, but
I don't think
they're not going to open if Lowe's doesn't want to
tell Lowe's what to do. No,
right.
I think yeah. But so yeah. But
I'm just saying it's a different decision process than what Disney has.
It is. Oh, it is absolutely. I think the difference is that as Axel mentioned, Universal tried. They brought all their people back to work. Disney didn't even try with the water parks. They didn't try with all the hotels. They left a lot more cast members furloughed than Universal did. So not only are they treating their annual pass holders crappily, but they're also, like Axel said, they're not even trying to bring their people back to work. They just said, we're going to leave the water parks closed. I mean, it's the summer. People would absolutely go to the water parks. Volcano Bay is packed on weekends, and it has been packed on weekends all summer. And the best thing about Volcano Bay is you're swimming around in chlorinated water, so automatically all these surfaces that you're touching are going to be disinfected with the chlorine in the water. So, even though people don't wear masks around most of the water park because you're in line for rides where you can't wear masks, at least you're in places where the chlorine is going to kill bacteria and viruses. So, anyway, I think... there's just a lot of decisions that Disney's made that have been disappointing, and I think we're gonna touch on certainly some more, especially annual pass holder treatment, when we come back after these messages. But I do want to mention a couple things in the chat quickly before they go, because Axel's getting a lot of appreciation here in the court.
I'm dying.
In the chat.
I'm dying.
When Axel enters a courtroom, the judge stands up. When Axel crosses the street, cars look both ways.
Death had a near Axel experience.
Jokes are the best, by the way.
Axel can pick oranges from an apple tree and make the best lemonade you've ever had. So anyway, thanks to everybody in the chat.
With the right bottles, I can make the best drink every day.
Yep, there you go. Axel's got a Universal Studios shirt and a Disney World mug. And there we go. So anyway, let's take... Recently, a police patrol stopped Axel when he was driving. They got off with only a warning. Wow. All right, let's take a commercial break, and we'll come back with some more discussion in a moment. Stay tuned.
Hi everyone, I'm Cosmic Chris Reed, inviting you to join my co-hosts and I every Monday at 9 p.m. Eastern on WDW News Today as we chat Disney Park memories, food, and Imagineer our own attractions, restaurants, hotels, and more. Share your stories with us in the YouTube chat. Plus, listen to WDWN Tunes at the same time to hear some Disney Park music paired with the show topics. Cosmic Read Live every Monday night at 9 p.m. Eastern on WDW News Today.
4 panelists, 30 minutes, 1 week in Disney Parks news. This is Parks Center. On Parks Center, the panel and I cover the top 7... 7? Yeah, 7 Disney Park stories of the past week. From attraction news to transportation scandals to new food and merchandise, we'll cover it all in 30 minutes or less. You can watch us stream live every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. at wdwntunes.com, watch episodes on demand at youtube.com/wdwnt, or subscribe to the audio version of the show on your favorite podcast app.
Dreamfinders is WDW News Today's podcast all about the creative culture surrounding Disney parks. Authors, Imagineers, dancers, actors, photographers, filmmakers, and a whole lot more have all stopped by to chat about how Disney has inspired their artistic work.
But I still remember sitting in conference tables and looking across at Michael and Jeffrey Katzenberg and this sort of little 6-year-old inside of me going, what in heaven's name is going on here?
And we're off and running, and Tony needs someone to lay it out for him. And there's no architect available. So the next thing I know, I'm laying out the pavilion.
I got to tell you, I have not enjoyed a podcast so much. It's just a warm conversation, and warm and intelligent conversation, which you don't find that often in podcasts.
Dreamfinders. Episodes drop every other Tuesday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcatcher.
WDW News Tonight is our weekly comedy show combining the news of the week, comedy segments, thoughtful discussions, insane characters, parody commercials, games, and more. Watch live on Thursdays at 9 p.m. and become a Wigs member to get access to a bonus post show. Watch WDW News Tonight episodes anytime and live on YouTube, or get the audio-only version on iTunes and other podcast services.
Welcome back to Pressing Issues. I'm your host, Jason Diffendahl. Here with me, I have Axel and Jill and Ashley, and we're talking this evening mostly about Disney Universal and the different ways that they have decided to do things during this unprecedented period in our lifetimes. I'd also like to give a shout out. We got a really, really nice fan mail the other day. And I'd like to give a shout out. I think her name was Sue. I can't pull it up right now, the mail. But I want to say it was Sue. she wrote a really nice fan mail, and it was very, very nice. I'm not going to read it, but I just want to say that we appreciate that. We appreciate your fan mail. We appreciate everybody who listens on a weekly basis. We appreciate all the people in the chat and that watch every week and talk about Axel and Axel running for president for some odd reason. But anyways.
I didn't even start this. I didn't even start this.
You
so
didn't.
I don't know where it came from. I mean, Rob
Don't
made
be
the artwork,
modest.
so I'm innocent. I'm innocent. The only thing that I wanted to say, and I have my camera on me, we have like about 360 people watching with 120 likes. That's only 30%. It could be better. So, like, if you haven't already, go hit that like button. It makes everyone easier to find us. Makes us go up in those YouTube statistics, and YouTube pushes us up as well. So more people can join the party. So go ahead and like. And if you haven't already, subscribe. It's a lot of people, a lot of new people on the channel since Tom has been doing the lives from the park. People finding their way to this show, to other shows. So welcome. Back to you, Jason.
Thank you, Axel. Yes, thanks for mentioning that. It's all those likes that give us the power to tell Tom, your live stream is over because we're coming on. Thanks to all of those who tuned in from Tom's live stream when he ended it right before 8 o'clock. But anyway, so there was one thing in the chat that someone said that I wanted to mention, and we talked about this a little bit, at least 2 months ago or something, and that is the level of guest service at Walt Disney World. I can't say Universal because I don't have enough experience with Universal, but I'll give an example. So today, Tom's staying at the Grand Floridian tonight. So I booked him villa using my points for DVC, and so he's staying there tonight. And we put on the room request a high floor because he likes to have a high floor with a nice view. And so I got a call. So he actually got a room ready text at about 6:30 this morning that his room was ready, but it was on the first floor. I got a call, and they called me because my phone number's on the reservation because it's my DVC points, even though it's Tom's name. I got a call from the concierge at the Grand Floridian, and they said, we know we sent you a text that your room is ready. This was like 10:30. We sent you a text that your room is ready, but we know that you wanted a high floor, and that room is on the first floor. And so we just want to let you know, if you wanted to wait another hour or two, we do have a room on a higher floor that we're cleaning right now, and you can have that one if you'd like. And I said, so yeah, sure. Tom was in the park, so I said, yeah, sure, he can wait. And so then about an hour later, they called me back. Same cast member from the concierge at Grand Floridian, and said, your room's now ready. It's on the fourth floor, not the first floor this time. And she gave me the room number, and she said, we sent you a text, but just want to make sure that in case you didn't get the text, that I want to let you know that your room is ready. And I'm like, great, thanks so much. That's very nice. That level of service. I mean, granted, the resorts are not at 95% occupancy right now, but that level of service is certainly something Disney could do, even if the resorts are at 95% occupancy. It just takes cast members to do it. It takes cast members who are empowered to do things that will make guests happy. And it takes cast members who have the time to do these things because they're not inundated with 100 other things that they're being demanded to do. So and I've experienced this, and I said this before. I think I said this after we stayed at Disney in the end of June when the DVC resorts first opened, even though the parks weren't opened. I said this, that the level of guest service that I've seen at Walt Disney World since they reopened whether it's the resorts or the servers in the restaurants or the cast members in the parks, the level of guest service that I've seen from the cast members at Walt Disney World has been something I have not seen in probably a decade and a half. And I attribute that to a couple things. One is that obviously the cast members with the most seniority were called back first. So you have all these cast members that are longtime cast members that have been around for a long time, that knew the service levels that Walt Disney World provided back 20, 25, 30 years ago. And everything's not so overly crowded that these cast members have time to make the guest experience a good one. And this call from the concierge today at the Grand Floridian just sort of cemented that in my mind and made me think of it now to mention it again tonight. You know, there are plenty of cast members at Walt Disney World that haven't been called back yet, that still want to go back. But then there's also a fair amount that don't want to go back, that aren't ready to go back. They signed this petition about we shouldn't open, you're going to put the cast members in danger. But there are plenty of cast members that want to be there, and there are more cast members still that want to go back. And all of those cast members are doing such a great job at everything. With the situation that we're all in, they are making the best of it, and they're making the experience a great one for guests. So much better than it has been in the past 15 years, I would say. Because you've got cast members that care, they're not overcrowded, there's not these guests demanding things, there's not entitlement of guests demanding this and that and everything, and the cast members just getting frustrated. You've got guests that are very appreciative to be there. You've got guests that are very appreciative that the parks are open, and you've got cast members that are very appreciative to be there and very happy that the guests are coming back. And so this is just a shout out to all the cast members at Walt Disney World for doing such a great job over the past couple of months.
It's interesting because in this sort of context of the Universal versus Disney discussion, you're absolutely right. I've had some stellar cast member experiences. It's funny, I was just talking to Latin Duchess in the chat, and we both had basically the same experience that I bet it was probably with the same cast member at the merchandise kiosk outside of Runaway Railway, that she helped us when we were looking for wishables. And unfortunately for Latin Duchess, there were only daisies left by the time she got there, but she helped me find a Chubby, and that was really awesome. And like, she took time, like, and part of it again is because there aren't a ton of people there, so she can take the time. But in the context of Universal versus Disney, it's like on a high level, Disney is kind of not as interested in guest service, and they're kind of more fixated on the dollars, but on the cast member, like corporate, but on a cast member level, it's very all about the guests and the great guest experience. Whereas Universal's almost the flip side, where Universal is putting out all this stuff to make APs happy, but then the guest service you receive from the individual team members can be pretty spotty at best in the parks. So that's a really interesting difference, that Universal kind of corporate-wise talks the talk, but in the parks, Disney is the one who walks the walk with the cast members who actually care and are going out of their way to create that really good guest experience.
And they're going out of their way to create that guest experience without having been told to. And in fact, it's probably likely that they've been told not to. The only reason they can do it now is because they have the time to do it, because the crowds are so much lower. And these low crowds have been, you know, I mean, if you look at pictures from Epcot today and stuff, and you know, our reporters tweeted that it's pretty crowded. The weekends have been pretty crowded. I noticed it at Universal. I noticed it at Disney. The weekends tend to be crowded. And that's no different than before coronavirus. But the weekends do tend to be very crowded compared to the weekdays at both parks. And
but Universal's definitely different.
Universal's different, I think, because they don't have a capacity level that's quite as tight as Disney. So
they're not.
But
they're
what's
not.
weird is that like the parks at Disney seem crowded, even though the park passes are all gone. The parks seem more crowded on weekends than weekdays. But you would kind of think the number of park passes available for each park shouldn't vary just because it's a weekend or a weekday, right? Like, they're based on capacity.
Yeah.
It's not like the park capacity varies between weekends and weekdays. So why do the parks seem more crowded on weekends when the capacity is the same? I don't know.
Well,
maybe
it's
because
interesting
the people that are buying $120 tickets are walking up on weekends and they're not doing it on weekdays. That's very likely to be the case.
Like, I went to Magic Kingdom last Sunday, and it was not crowded at all. We did almost every single ride in the whole entire park on a Sunday. But on the flip side, like, I know there were people who were in Epcot yesterday, and it was mobbed. Like, there's a wait for the temperature screen. And that was after rope drop. So it's interesting. But then meanwhile, I was in Epcot on Tuesday, and it was a ghost town. So it does almost seem like capacity fluctuates, but there is definitely not strict limitations on capacity at Universal. They are not enforcing any real capacity limitations, because that place on Saturday was I didn't go on any rides. I didn't go on a single ride. I was there for hours because the waits for everything were crazy. And there were so many people in that park.
Yeah, no, agreed. Last Saturday at Universal was crazy, absolutely crazy. I mean, still, and so I was talking to some of the team members there. The one that I know, as we were waiting for the first show of the Born Stuntacular last Saturday, and he said he's excited to work weekends because it's almost normal in terms of crowd levels. It's almost. A weekend now is almost what an average weekday would have been before coronavirus. So yeah, I mean it's definitely crowded. So, but I mean things are going to change now. I think now that kids are back to school too. Go ahead, Axel.
For me, and then with exception of the Grand Floridian, we stayed in quite some hotels now at Disney. The hotel experience, the check-in experience, the service was better every single time at Universal, with exception of the Grand Floridian. All the other hotels, even if it was Cabana Bay, which is one of the cheapest hotels, their service was it was there. Like, you request a room, you ask something, they were on spot. And with the cast members in Disney, in the beginning, you had all these people that you had all these people that wanted to be back.
That the hotels at Universal are run by Lowe's, and so they're not Universal they're not Universal team members that work at the hotels. They're actually Lowe's team members. But at Disney, you've got Disney cast members in both. But no, I agree. It's just a minute thing to mention. But you're right. Otherwise, go ahead.
For the cast members at Disney, like in the very beginning, you say, service, the cast members, I was surprised, I haven't seen this ever. But now, and especially, you could see that at the end of July. Because Disney needed some cast members to come back, and they didn't even have a choice. It was or you're going to come back, or you're out. And we've seen that email go by. I think we posted it. It was online. They didn't have a choice. And you see some of those cast members that are in the parks and that don't have a choice. The only sad thing is there's such a big difference between the cast members who want to be there and make you happy, and then once in a while you're going to run into one of those cast members that has to be there, and you can clearly see the difference. You can feel it in the way they talk. There's a big difference. But for Universal, I never had a bad experience. besides at Universal, their guest relations is like, it's non-existing. I don't know who they put in guest relations, but those people shouldn't be there. They're like, yeah, I think they're the worst of the bunch. Like in Disney, they put the best in guest relations because they know what they have to handle. But like at Universal, it's like, ugh, you don't want to be there. Like I can better like get it handled somewhere else than at guest services for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think somebody in the chat mentioned this too, that maybe one of the differences at Disney right now is there aren't college program cast members. And not from a sense of, you know, they don't get indoctrinated in the Disney way. And I think that's part of what you were saying before, Jason, is a lot of the cast members, Disney seemed to favor bringing back the full-time cast members over the part-time cast members. And so I think a lot of those full-timers are full-timers who have been around for years and years and are just have been there and understand giving good show. Whereas a lot of people who are part-timers or college program cast members don't necessarily get that level of training and don't get taught how to give that level of care to cast members. And maybe even new full-time cast members don't get that anymore, but the ones who are there have been around for a really long time and got that training back when they started and still believe in that and believe in giving guests that level of service, because at the end of the day, that really is so much of what differentiates Disney from everywhere else, from every other company on the planet. And it's slipping, but it's nice to see that there are still so many cast members that still care that much and want to do that. I mean, walking into Epcot, the first day that Epcot reopened on July 15th, there were cast members lining the walkways, standing in the front of the park. You could tell how happy they were to be there, how happy they were that guests were finally allowed back in the park, that they could, like, there are cast members that care about bringing that joy. That's what they do. That's what they live for. And those are a lot of the cast members who came back. So it's just nice to see. Yeah, I think there's a higher percentage of those cast members working in the parks right now, just because of who Disney brought back and how they brought them back.
Yep. No, I think that's absolutely the case. Absolutely the case. And yes, people say in the chat, there are some college program cast members that are great, but many of them, I think, are not there drinking the Disney Kool-Aid, as they said. Latinx Duchess in the chat said they're not drinking the mouse juice. So yeah, no, I think, and plus the bigger issue, and this is the bigger issue whether you're a college program cast member or not, is that the Disney training is absolutely nowhere near what it used to be 20 to 30 years ago. The traditions course, and we talked about this with Ashley a couple weeks ago, the traditions course is a shell of what it used to be. And so not only are these people not really indoctrinated into Disney, but they're also not trained properly in the way that Disney does things, and that's why the guest service has dropped off. All right, so let's talk about the Universal versus Disney annual pass experience. So as we said, Disney's still not selling annual passes. Universal has been. And so when I visited with Universal with my family last week, I bought them all annual passes, 3-park annual passes, so that we could go to Volcano Bay. And the Universal, when they first reopened, Universal had a bunch of annual pass holder appreciation things. You got free Coke Freestyle refillable mugs. They gave you, there were free pins and buttons and everything, lanyards. Then that went away after the first, I think that went away like after Disney reopened. But then just recently, starting on August 10th, they started again these annual pass holder appreciation days, where there's new buttons and magnets. There's new, they have special menus with special menu items at Lombard's and at Navigators Club. There's a couple of other pass holder only perks at Universal. There's pass holder lounge. at Universal, something that Disney used to do years and years ago but hasn't done. So Universal, there's a special annual pass holder popcorn bucket is another thing I just remembered. So Universal is absolutely doing everything they can to reach out and make their pass holders feel special. And I'm impressed. Like I said, I bought a Universal Annual Pass for the first time. The first time I've ever had a Universal Pass. I bought back in June when I first went. I bought them for my family this past trip. And not to mention that the Universal Annual Passes, they are giving you 15 months for the price of 12. So my June Annual Pass is good till next September, which means I can get 2 years. Well, I could have gotten 2 years worth of Halloween Horror Nights out of it. I can still get one. But still, the annual pass I bought for my kids is good till next November, so they'll be able to go to Halloween Horror Nights next year too. So you've got all these perks that Universal is giving out to annual pass holders, and they're even giving them out to the lowest level of annual. But they have 4 levels of annual pass holders. Even the lowest level of annual pass holders are eligible for all these perks. They're eligible for early entry into the parks. They're eligible for early entry into Volcano Bay, and so Disney, on the other hand, not only is not selling annual passes. They're actively trying to get their annual pass holders to cancel. They're giving them all these opportunities to cancel, although they make it really, really difficult to do so. And you have to wait on hold on the phone for hours and hours. And then when you cancel and they say they're going to stop charging you, they keep charging you anyway. But that's an IT issue more than a pass holder department issue, I think. But still, Disney's doing nothing at all to court their annual pass holders to come back. There's some annual pass holder discounts on hotels, I think, to some extent. But, I mean, there's always hotel discounts, and they're discounts off the rack rate, so that means it's not necessarily as good. Like, I was looking at booking the Swan, and I could actually get a better rate using my Marriott Bonvoy membership than I could using the pass holder rate at the Swan. So it was like, well, there's no point in that. But anyway, Universal is doing a lot for their pass holders. Well, yeah, to some extent, but Universal's doing a lot for their. You did. Universal's doing a lot for their pass holders. And they're doing more than normal, I would think, for their pass holders. Like I said, I've only been a pass holder since June, but it seems like they're doing a heck of a lot for pass holders. Whereas Disney's doing everything they can to keep pass holders away. And granted, Disney has more pass holders than Universal, but they also have more parks with more capacity than Universal. So in reality, unless there's a huge discrepancy between the number of pass holders versus the capacity of the parks, which I don't think it's that big of a discrepancy, why is Universal doing these great things for their pass holders and showing that they really appreciate the pass holders, while Disney is basically snubbing their noses at pass holders and acting like they're third-rate citizens and giving park passes to people that come and stay at the Days Inn in Kissimmee? You can come and stay at the Days Inn in Kissimmee with a 5-day pass and get treated better as far as park passes than if you're an annual pass holder for Disney. So why is that? Why is Disney really trying to screw their annual pass holders? And what's the problem here? And so, that's kind of what I wanted to open up. Go ahead, talk.
I have a theory that I kind of realized, I think, while you were talking. I think it boils down to the way that they look at their guests is different. I think Universal, for all of their pluses and minuses, realizes that they are still not the main draw to Orlando. They're not. At least from like an out-of-state perspective, if you have to drive, even from like Georgia, it's not a draw just to go to Universal. So they're doing everything they can because they know that their pass holders are the ones that are still coming back day after day that are going to keep them going. I think
so.
Disney
Essentially, Disney's taking their pass holders for granted.
Yes.
Well, yes. I mean, but at the same token, they're thinking, well, we're the big draw. People are, we're open. People are going to travel from all over, at least the lower 48 to get here because we're open and we're special. So I think that's where it comes down to. That's why Universal is trying to show appreciation, make sure that their annual pass holders are taken care of and happy, because I think they're kind of I think they are appreciative, but at the same token, they're a little afraid. Like, well, if the AP stream dries up, we're not. Our attendance will be way down to the point where we may as well not even bother being open. Versus, at least up here, it wasn't big news when Universal reopened. Not a blip on local news. Nothing. Disney announced they were reopening. It was everywhere. People that don't even talk about Disney at work and stuff were talking about the fact that Disney was finally reopening. So I think that's the difference. I think, there's Harry Potter and that's cool. But when you're talking about the production to travel from out of state, that's still not as much of a draw as Disney parks are. So I think that's the difference. And kudos to them, though, for appreciating the annual pass holders who are the ones coming to their parks.
But that's because the majority of pass holders in Universal, and you have to see it, Disney has a lot of pass holders that do it because of it's a cheaper way to get in the parks for a longer time. People travel, like you say, from all over. They want to come maybe 2 weeks. But at that point, it's cheaper to buy an annual pass than actual tickets. And that's something that at Universal isn't true. At Universal, if you buy a pass, it's somebody who lives nearby, loves the park. Because before, if we traveled down here, Universal was a one-day trip. I wasn't going to buy an annual pass for a one-day trip. Disney, I was going to go multiple days to Disney, and then with my discount on merchandise and some on food, I was better off buying an annual pass than buying tickets. And that's something that, upon this day, is still true for Disney. Disney doesn't want to sell passes because they don't want people to spend too much time here. They want to measure their risk they're taking. And Universal is just different. Universal knows that the people who buy those passes are the people who are going to come back, who love the park, who love to be there. And that's why they treated them different. Easy for us. We bought an annual pass for Universal in May. When we moved, we said this is not going to be the first thing buying a pass. We still have our Disney pass. We don't need the Universal pass. Once we knew that Universal was going to open, end of May, we bought our annual pass. I think it was, maybe a month and a half later, all of a sudden there's a promotion of 3 months extra. So we just walk up at Volcano Bay to a guest relations window, and we asked hey, we bought our passes quite some time ago. Now there's this promotion with 3 months extra. Can we still have that? It took them 5 minutes, and we had the 3 extra months. We just asked, hey, this promo wasn't around when we bought it, and we still did. Now, 5 minutes, and we had our 3 extra months. We called Disney back a month ago, even up until the day we could cancel. And we asked them, what's the deal with the water parks? Because we have an annual pass, which we pay extra for the water parks. What's going to happen? Do we need to cancel, buy a new one? Do we need to cancel just the water parks part? What do you want us to do? And the good people at that call center just we don't know, because Disney doesn't communicate. Disney doesn't tell their pass holders hey, those of you who have an annual pass with water parks, don't worry. We're going to give you extra months for the regular parks. We're going to make sure that you have your water parks when you get your next pass, anything. They didn't communicate about water parks at all. It's like those parks never existed.
And that's the thing. Like Disney didn't have to commit to anything. They could have simply come out and said, you know, those pass holders who have the premium with the water parks included, you know, don't worry, the water parks aren't open, but we'll take care of you when they finally do open. Like, that's all they had to say. They didn't have to commit to anything. They didn't have to commit to saying you'll get an extra water parks for a year or whatnot. They just had to say, look, we acknowledge that this is a concern of yours, and don't worry, you'll be taken care of. That's all they had to do, but they didn't even do that. Like, that doesn't cost them anything to reassure their customers, but they don't do it.
Well, and this gets back to what you were talking about. Like, Disney, I mean, Bob Chapek said it at the shareholders meeting. Annual pass holders have a lower value to Disney than day ticket holders and resort guests. And here's the problem. They are not doing anything to change that. Their attitude towards annual pass holders is only pushing that what is probably true. They probably on a daily basis make less money off annual pass holders than they do off somebody who's buying a day ticket. I get that. But they could do more by treating annual pass holders well to lower that gap between what AP spend and what day ticket holders spend. And they are choosing to go in the opposite direction by treating annual pass holders badly and verbally in a public forum saying, we don't value you. They're broadening that gap. What they could be like, here's what I don't understand. Okay, the park pass reservation thing, I get. I think it's terribly unfair. I think APs ought to file a class action lawsuit against Disney for restricting AP access to the parks when there is clearly plenty of access available for resort guests and day ticket holders. And I'm just waiting for the lawsuit on that because it's ridiculous. But why doesn't Disney incentivize APs to stay at the hotels? They've got tons of hotel availability. Clearly, if Tom can get his Grand Floridian reservation available at 6:30 a.m., there was nobody staying in that room before. Incentivize APs to stay at the resorts. Why is that so hard? And yet Pop Century is the cheapest hotel and it's $200 a night. I booked at the Swan, which is a Marriott hotel, because the rate was so much, like, it was like $65 cheaper to stay at the Swan, where I could walk to Hollywood Studios in 15 minutes to not deal with all of the getting into the park in the morning, and the traffic is so backed up and the parking is so backed up and the line from getting in from the parking lot through health check is so backed up. I walked in, I was from my hotel room in Hollywood Studios in under 25 minutes, staying at the Swan. That's not Disney money, that's Marriott money. So why is Disney not incentivizing APs to spend more money in the parks? They gave us that 30% discount, which I think was Josh D'Amaro, and God bless Josh D'Amaro, and maybe he'll start thinking about other ways to incentivize APs to spend more money. I spent so much more money on merchandise during that 30% discount. Like, they just need to treat us well. And Jason's laughing because he knows it's true. They just need to treat us better and incentivize us, and they're doing the exact opposite. Universal is incentivizing APs to show up, giving them special treatment. Holy moly, that pass holder dining area upstairs at Lombard's is amazing. It's like borderline as nice as Club 33 in the Magic Kingdom. Okay, that's pushing it a little bit, but it's so nice. If you're a Universal AP, go there because it's so nice so and it's so cool.
It's so nice.
Yes.
Yeah.
You can walk out on the deck of this pass holder area and like survey all of Universal over the lagoon. It's amazing. And you don't have to be anything other than the lowest level of pass holder to get in there. So, and guess what? It's a sit down restaurant. So is the pass holder exclusive area at the Navigators Club above Confisco and Islands of Adventure. That's more money. People are more likely to drink. Like, you're giving people reasons to spend more money in your parks, whereas Disney is doing the exact opposite. They're chasing pass holders away and not giving them any reason to spend money in the parks. And it's just so frustrating that Disney is looking at it as, you have less value, so we don't care about you. Whereas Universal is saying, we know you're our biggest fan, so we're going to incentivize you by treating you well to spend more money here. And that's where Universal is making the much better decisions. And that's why it is part of why there are so many people there on the weekends, but they're spending money. They're giving us Horror Nights merchandise and getting us to spend $100 in the Horror Nights tribute store, and I'd go back and do it again.
That's
like,
how crazy is that? That Universal was planning to do Horror Nights up until a couple weeks ago. They have all this merchandise for Horror Nights. It's the 30th anniversary of Horror Nights. They have all this merchandise already, and then Horror Nights gets canceled at essentially the last minute, and they have people getting in line for a bigger line than you would see at Epcot for pass holder magnets. They have people getting in line to buy this merchandise for an event that got canceled. That, to me, is pretty amazing, considering that when Disney reopened, they had a taste of Epcot food and wine. They didn't have any food and wine merchandise. They had all the flower and garden merchandise that nobody wanted because that event was over. But yet Universal has all these Halloween Horror Nights things, the store that's an amazing store, all the merchandise. People are gobbling it up for an event that's not happening. It's pretty amazing that they've tapped into this market that Disney could really only hope to. I mean, there's not a Universal outlet store at the outlet selling Universal merchandise that doesn't get sold in the parks. But there's Disney outlet stores all over Florida selling all this merchandise that they can't sell in the parks. So it's pretty amazing to me, the difference.
Jason, I just wanted to come back about making money, and especially the food part. And I'm still amazed, like when I go through my Disney experience. I mean, like within the team, we have like everybody's like befriended because for the reservations. And every time I see a reservation of sci-fi, and that's one of them. Sci-fi is always like a reservation for 6. And then I go look like who's in the park that day, why 6? The reason why 6 is because it's almost impossible to get a reservation for 1, 2, or 3. Those little cars can sit 6, and Disney wants to fill them up. So they would even prefer to have empty seats than fill them up with 2 people. And that's what's bothering me, is they don't even give you a chance. So everybody who's watching and listening, and you plan to go to Disney, if you can't find a reservation at the time you want, try to change your party to 4 or 6. And you might see all of a sudden a time pop up. Just take that time, and when you go in, just change the amount of people, and you're still good. I think it's ridiculous they do that, and again, it's something that I feel, me as an annual pass holder, if we go in there and we're 2, why do I have to book for 6? Because now we know what game they're playing. Why do we need to book for 6 if we're just 2? Just give 2 people the seat so they can have their dinner, that's it. But now you have to go book for 6, which is ridiculous. And then there's so many things where I'm asking myself, like, Disney, you're the biggest one. Why do you need to do that? And that's what a lot of things, like, Disney is the leader. Disney is the biggest of them all. And still, they do things where everybody is wondering every single day, why are they doing that? And that's going from merchandise to park hours to food. They already made their name. They don't need to do anything. And I think they know that by now. And they're just like, I mean, we're Disney. We can do that. Let Universal hassle. And that's what's bothering me right now. There's no more hassling in Disney. It's like, we take things for granted. You will come and spend money. We're all good. And if you don't come, well, an eBayer will come and you can buy it off eBay. And that's what I'm missing, and what I'm seeing at Universal is that at least we matter over there, and I'm not sure if we do matter that much in Disney anymore.
I don't think we do.
No, they don't charge the $10.
I mean, it sounds like Chapek, to Jill's point, Chapek said it all during the shareholder meeting. Pass holders don't matter because he's under the impression that they don't spend as much money, which I don't know what pass holders he's talking about, because if you look at the average, like, they come more days, but they also, a pass holder is more likely, at least in my experience, to walk around, eat, have a snack, have, a glass of something or a Dole Whip, and maybe buy some merchandise, but won't necessarily ride an attraction, which means it doesn't cost you anything for them for operating the attractions. So, and you're coming back day over day. And quite frankly, all of the pass holders that I know spend, quite frankly, an obscene amount of money on merchandise. So I don't know where they're getting this impression that pass holders don't spend money.
Here's where they are, and it's misguided, to say the least. But what's happening is that the data they're looking at, so you've got a family of 4 from who knows where, Minnesota, comes for a week, and they stay at Coronado Springs, and they spend like $8,000 over the course of that week. They come once every 5 years to Disney. You have an annual pass holder who spends $1,000 for their annual pass, and over the course of a year probably spends $7,000 on food and merchandise. They go into the parks more days. They go into the parks 20, 30 days out of a year, versus the family from Minnesota that goes 7 days. But over the course of that year, that annual pass holder spends $8,000, just like the family from Minnesota. What Bob Chapek sees is that this family of 4 spends over $1,000 a day that they're in the parks, and the annual pass holder spends, $300 a day every day that they're in the parks. That's what Chapek sees. He doesn't see the totals at the end that show that the pass holder spends more, and that the pass holder spends that amount every year versus once every 5 years. So he's looking at the data, and it's misleading. It's misleading him to think that pass holders are less valuable. They're absolutely more valuable, simply because they come back every time, and they spend money every time they go. And so over the course of their lifetime, they spend absolutely much more money than a family of 4 from Minnesota that comes once every 5 years. They don't spend it all at once, but they're more profitable over the long term. And that's where Disney management has had a problem for the past 20 years, is that they don't think long term. They just don't. They can't. I don't know why, but they cannot think long term. Nothing they do, nothing that Disney has done in the past 20 years has been done with long-term thinking in mind. And so this is just another example where they're cutting off their nose to spite their face. They're pissing off the pass holders because they think they're not as profitable. And then the pass holders all leave. And then the family of 4 from Minnesota decides not to come this year because of coronavirus. And then Disney's like, where is everybody? Where are all the guests? No one's coming. What are we going to do? We don't have any money. People aren't spending money. Because they pissed off all the pass holders and everyone canceled their pass and now they're not coming. So what they've done is they've become too dependent on a group of people that are more likely to cancel their plans. And that's what happens. And that's why Universal's crowded on the weekends and are vastly unpredictable and do not spend the same amount of money year after year. And that's why Universal's crowded on the weekends, because pass holders keep coming back and spending money. And Disney's not crowded any day, except maybe the weekends, because these families that are taking a once in a decade or once every half decade vacation just aren't coming this year.
We're going to do it now.
Like if they're going to come every 5 years, well, they'll come next year, and then it'll only be 4 years till they come again. That's all. It's still the same number of trips. They're just not doing it this year. And so Disney is losing out because they are focusing on the wrong demographic. And the demographic that they think is profitable just aren't the ones that are coming. That's the problem.
Exactly. And if Bob Chapek looked at it that way and cared about how much annual pass holders are spending in total and did things to incentivize them to spend even more, which he absolutely could. And again, look at Universal. Universal is doing so many things that's incentivizing people. There are pass holder food items at almost every single food outlet everywhere in Universal, and people want to go try them, and they change every month. It's such small things that are driving people to spend more money, and yet Disney doesn't see it. And Disney doesn't do it. And it's those sorts of things that could bump up that average spend per pass holder and make pass holders even more valuable than they are, whether Bob Chapek wants to acknowledge it or not. And it's just what? No other business craps on its loyal customers more than Disney does, it seems.
Nope.
It's pass holders are your most loyal customers, and the rule in the business world is that you treat your loyal customers well. And instead, Bob Chapek comes out and publicly says, we don't value you as much as people who come once in a lifetime. You pass holders who are coming all the time, who are spending money, who are out there being brand ambassadors. Where's the value on that? In modern day marketing, there is so much value on the loyal customer as a brand ambassador, and Bob Chapek doesn't care because that's not a data point he can see and attach a price tag to. And it's all just how much have you given me today? Oh, you didn't give me as much today as that family of 4, so you're not as valuable to me. And that's the attitude, and that's why it's going to drive pass holders away. You're absolutely right.
Yep. And so 2 things from the chat. Charlene says, I honestly believe the casual Disney fan is going to stop going because they're overpricing everything. I think that's very true. And so when these casual Disney fans stop going because everything's overpriced and Disney doesn't have the annual pass holders to lean on, they're going to be screwed. And this is from Amy in the chat, and she makes a really good point. How does Bob Chapek know the value of an annual pass holder when they don't scan your annual pass when you make a purchase? So they have no idea how much merchandise is being purchased by any given annual pass holder. They don't know. They don't track your purchases. If they did, they could tell that you're reselling. So they don't have any idea. Certain annual pass holders are spending thousands and thousands of dollars. If you go to Las Vegas and you spend thousands of dollars at the blackjack table, they're going to comp you a room and free food. If Disney could go and see that you're spending thousands and thousands of dollars on stupid pins and plastic little pieces of junk, and comp you some meals somewhere, that would make you really happy, wouldn't it? I mean, they do it in Vegas. Disney could do it too if they knew what they were doing with their IT systems and could track your purchases. But they don't. And so, again, they don't have the data, they don't know what they're doing, and they can't make decisions without data.
Jason, well, they don't scan your pass, but there is a button on the register that they have to hit to apply the discount. So
right, but it's not an individual thing. They're not tracking how much you actually are spending. They're just tracking all annual pass holders spending. Yeah.
Yes, I guess that's true.
Right.
As an overall, yes, but they don't have the data point of each individual pass holder, which they could easily get.
And so here's another point. Might we be underestimating the number of annual pass holders who show up with their own bottle of water and walk around the park for 3 hours after work 2 or 3 times a month? Maybe, but then again, those people aren't really going on the rides all the time. Those aren't the diehards that go and try to do as many rides as they can in a day. So the fact that you're letting them in the park for a couple hours after work, and maybe they buy a drink or maybe they buy a snack, but maybe not, it's not costing you anything to let them in. Right? That's the thing. The annual pass holder spends $1,000 up front to be able to go and do that. but they're not going on as many rides. I mean, I know annual pass holders who, over the course of a year, go on less rides than a family of 4 that comes for a week. Because the annual pass holders don't go there just to go on the rides. They go there for the ambiance, to walk around, yada, yada, yada. I mean, they're not... they're taking up space in the parks, which, now with coronavirus may be an issue, but before this, they're not hurting anything. They're not going on many rides. They're just walking around for the ambiance, or maybe to eat at Epcot or whatever. It's not costing Disney any money to let them in. Now with coronavirus, it is, and maybe that. But
Ben brought
still,
up another
the data
really
that
good
JPEG
point.
was using.
The data that JPEG is using, Ben brings up a really good point, is grossly inaccurate anyway. When you eat dinner at most restaurants, you don't get an AP discount. When you purchase a bottle of soda at a cart, you don't get an AP discount. So there's a lot of money that APs are spending in the parks that isn't being tracked. So it's not even like the numbers that JPEG is looking at are probably... the real numbers are going to be a good bit higher than that, because there are so many places. If he's only looking at what AP spend based on AP discount, he's not seeing the full picture, because there are so many things you don't get an AP discount on.
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
True.
And so, Randall Panda in the chat says, "I'd like to believe this is just JPEG misreading data, but in reality, Disney probably has an army of adjusters, accountants, and park ops gaming this all out. To some extent, maybe, but in a lot of cases, I think they're just going to tell JPEG what he wants to hear. But in the other case, like we've been mentioning, they don't have the data to be able to tell. They don't have data that shows how much annual pass holders spend on meals or drinks because you don't get a discount. So there may be an army of accountants figuring all this out, but they're doing it without a full suite of data to be able to figure everything out. And so the problem is that when you make conclusions from an incomplete set of data, your conclusions are bound to be wrong, or at least misleading to some extent. And I think that's what's happening. Apparently, Rob Whiteside is in the chat, and everyone's going nuts now, saying Whiteside acts.
He showed up. He showed up. He showed up.
Maybe they should have an AP reward system where APs can get rewarded for spending more. Hey, that's a good idea.
They can do it at your local grocery store.
Accountants. Yeah.
Use the Kroger model. Instead of fuel points, you get like.
Yeah, they could. Yeah, they could. They could do it at Piggly Wiggly. Why can't they do it at Disney?
If they would do that at Disney and reward buying a lot, Tom would sleep every single night in the presidential suite.
Absolutely.
Everybody would hate him even more.
He'd be like the rewards leader. They would probably the reason they don't do it is because he would be the rewards leader, and they would have to give him.
I don't know.
Stuff.
The resellers would give him a run for his money of how much they spend in the parks.
Yeah, the resellers could practically live there.
But that's how you figure out who the resellers are. Yeah, guess what? There's another benefit of implementing a system like that. You can really easily figure out who the resellers are when you see who's spending $1,000 at World of Disney every day.
Yep. Carrie in the chat says Hong Kong had a system for rewarding AP purchases. They absolutely did, because when I went to Hong Kong last spring, they had a system where you got a card, and for every 40 Hong Kong dollars, I want to say, you spent, you got a stamp on the card, and when you filled up the card, you could cash it in for free merchandise. And so over the course of 2 days at Hong Kong, was this Hong Kong or was it Shanghai? I can't remember now. I want to say it might have been, I think it was Hong Kong. Over the course of a day and a half at Hong Kong, there were 3 of us. We filled up like 7 of those cards, buying Hong Kong merchandise. So it was kind of crazy.
Oh,
I mean, 40 Hong Kong dollars is like $7 US, but still.
Do you know who else does an incentive program where they reward pass holders for how much money they spend? Universal. Universal had a, and I don't even, this might even still be the case, that if you spent $80, It's still going on. If you spend $80 in one purchase at a Universal store, you get $20 to spend again anytime starting the next day on. So Universal was rewarding pass holders for how much money they spent, and they scan your pass, your individual pass, when you make a purchase.
When you buy things. Yep. Yeah, that's right.
Universal got that figured out too.
I bought. If you spend $80, you get a $20 coupon, and it's electronic. It goes right on your pass. You don't even need to worry about having a coupon. When you spend $80, you get a $20 credit on your pass for your next purchase that's over $50. And so if you spend $160, you get 2 credits. You get 2 $20 credits for your next purchase over $50. It's valid starting the next day. This promotion is good actually till the end of September. And the $20 credits are good until the end of the year. And I know this because now I have 3 $20 credits on my annual pass that I didn't get a chance to spend when we were down there, because I bought like $200 worth of stuff on the last day and got all these credits and haven't had a chance to spend them. But anyway, yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, it's not like it's not exactly a reward system, but it is a reward for annual pass holders to spend money.
Yep.
And so...
What? You mean being able to buy a backpack when you spend X amount of dollars isn't a good reward for spending money?
No, because that's not an annual pass holder reward. That's a reward for everybody.
Right, but that's like it's the only thing that Disney does is the crappy backpack.
Oh, you mean you can spend $15 for a $5 backpack instead of paying retail of $35.
You've already spent $100. Yeah.
Or $50 or whatever.
That's not a good model.
It's very true.
Spend more money.
I guess not. Kate in the chat wants to know if we're taking a break soon because she needs to refill her beverage. We're actually pretty much out of time. We hit our 2-hour mark. This has been a great discussion. I know we haven't had as many rants necessarily, especially not from me, as normal. And
Jill's was awesome.
I apologize. Jill had a rant. Ashley had a rant. So maybe I'll have some more rants next week. But I think this has been a really great discussion. We could certainly carry on this discussion some more if Kate's like, oh no, I didn't mean to end it. No, it's not your fault, Kate. Usually about this time is when I realize we're at the end of our time here. But yeah, no, I'm happy for Jill and Ashley and everybody else to come on. Axel wants to rant about something, yes?
No, there's one thing missing in this episode. Normally every episode, when you say the word wigs, there's all of a sudden in the chat, all caps, wigs, like 20 times. So just to check if there's any wigs members.
Can I make a wigs plug?
Well,
Jill can make a wigs plug.
I was about to say, Jill, what do we have in store for our Wix members?
So I am super excited to tell our Wigs members, and to all of you out there, if you've been considering joining Wigs, we just released a brand new Wigs exclusive show filmed by our very own Axel, starring Tom Corliss, where it's called Detailed, and our very first episode just dropped on Friday. It is for Wigs members at the $7 and higher tier, and it is Tom kind of giving you an inside look at some of the details that make Disney so special. So the very first episode is filmed at Abracadabra, and he kind of gives you a little tour and tells you some of the hidden details, some of the homages to Imagineers and past attractions that are hidden within the decor at Abracadabra. It's really cool. It's available now. So if you are thinking about joining Wigs, there's one more benefit. We also have an awesome Discord channel for all Wigs members. That is a great place to go hang out and talk to your fellow Wigs members. You get access to post shows. You get access to all of our past podcasts. Tons of great benefits. So you can head over to patreon.com/WDWNT and take a look and see what we have to offer and sign up there.
Bill in the chat asks, what is Wigs?
WIGS is the WDWNT Inner Globe Society. That is what WIGS stands for. It is a special group run through Patreon. So for a monthly donation, you get access to special benefits that the general audience doesn't have access to. So post shows, Park Center and WDW News Tonight do post shows after every episode, with a few exceptions. Wigs at certain tiers get core bucks every month to buy prizes on the prize wall located at my.wdwnt.com. It gives you access to the Discord channel. It gives you access to a ton of benefits. So patreon.com/WDWNT is where you can check out more information about the Wigs program and join if you'd like.
Yay. Katie, no, you did not script the flow of the show. We were coming to the end, but it's that time. It's past my bedtime, as Tom would say. So I would like to thank my panelists here. Axel, who apparently, according to the chat, Axel can dribble a bowling ball, and he's also counted to infinity twice.
What can I say?
But, what can I say? Thanks to Axel. Thank you, Jill, for coming on, and thanks to Ashley for coming on. As always, it's been a great discussion. Thank you to Kevin, who's been our producer for tonight, running the tech behind the scenes here. Thanks to everybody who's watched. We had 400 viewers at some point. So thanks to everyone who's watching. I'd also like to mention, Axel, there's people in chat that said if you have a reservation for 6, they're happy to come dine with you.
Mm-hmm.
So
well, there will be an auction later this year. I'll have a talk with Pete and see if there's like a dinner with Pete and Axel.
Yeah.
Or Rob and Axel. If Rob makes it to Florida, that's even better.
There you go.
Like having dinner with Rob and Axel.
Yeah.
And we throw in the T-shirts of our cool logo with it.
It can be like your very own campaign rally.
There you go. That's a good idea. So yes, but thanks everybody for watching. Thanks for everybody in the chat. Will Tom Corliss be there? I hope not. He has his own. So Tom has his own meals with Tom Corliss in the auction, and usually everyone else's sell for more money than Tom's. But anyway, Pete takes people to jelly rolls in the auction. Yeah, a lot of that. Those things were auctioned off last year. They were a big hit. I think we're going to definitely do that again this year. But
I'm going to highly recommend
everybody for another great show.
I'm going to highly recommend that you have drinks with Axel at Jack Lindsay's. That is my favorite.
And we always got the cool seat.
Axel got us the awesome table at Jack Lindsay's.
Very good. Axel can get anything. I don't know how Axel
he kind of can
ask for things. Like, can I have a 3-month extension to my annual pass? Sure, you're Axel. You absolutely can. But anyway.
I go wearing this T-shirt, so it makes up for that.
I got yelled at last time I was in Disney for wearing a Universal mask. And she's like, we don't allow those masks in Disney. And I said, well, if you would sell masks that would fit me, I would happily wear them.
Right.
But even the large size at Disney is like the small size at Universal. And so when I told her that,
the Universal masks are so much better.
Have a point. Yes, and now we have all the Halloween. I have like 12 Halloween Horror Nights masks in a box outside of my office. I'm going to auction some of those in the charity auction in November too. So, now they have adult extra large masks, which I did order from Shop Disney, and of course they haven't arrived yet. I'm going on like 3.5 weeks now, so we'll see when they get here.
Yeah, but it's a much more limited selection than it's not. You can't get every single mask in extra large. It's only like 5 or 6 that you can get in extra large.
It is. Yes. Yep.
And even
anyway,
so,
thanks
even
everybody
when
for watching.
They're not as good.
Thanks everybody for watching. Thanks to everyone on the panel. Thanks to Kevin. We will be back next week with some more pressing issues. So tune in again. We'll see you next Sunday night. Good night, everybody. Oh my Lord!
Nice.
Oh, you haven't seen that, Jason? That's awesome. Look at
I
it.
have not seen that. I have not. Is that going to be what's on your T-shirt too?
That's going to be the T-shirt that we're going to throw in the Rob and Axel dinner. So